This is the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast with Ferd Neiman. If you're looking to generate wealth and passive income in the lucrative world of mobile home parks, you're in the right place. You'll discover solutions to the common legal and operational pitfalls and how to optimize parks to maximize income. Your host is in the trenches. He's a real estate attorney, financial analyst, and mobile home park investor and operator. Now, let's turn it over to Ferd Neiman.
Welcome back, Mobile Home Park Nation. Ferd Neiman here again, Dave, another episode of the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast. Got another great guest for you today, another fellow attorney. He hails from California, so we'll get to hear some fun stories there. But help me welcome my guest, John Pentecost. John, thanks for coming on, man.
Hey, Ferd, thanks a lot for having me. Really appreciate the opportunity and to reach out to some of your audience and let them know about Hart Kienle Pentecost and here in California.
Yeah, well, thanks again. So we were talking a little bit offline, and I'm familiar with your firm. You guys are always a big sponsor of some MHI stuff and have some good events there. But maybe for those that don't know you, maybe tell us kind of what you do, what your specialty is, and how you got into the MH space.
Well, I'm with Hart Kienle Pentecost, and we've been around for about 42 years, and I have been here for 38 of those years. And it was interesting. I sort of got in at the very beginning with manufactured housing and seemed to like it. It seemed to, be my little niche, and did evictions, tons of evictions, and then got into operations and preparing the leases and rules and regulations, architectural standards and the like. And then I just took over more and more of the mobile home practice here at Hart Kienle Pentecost, and then became an owner in 2020 with my partner Andrew Kienle, who does trust litigation. We're a full service law firm. We have about 14 attorneys. We do employment law, we do construction law, civil litigation. As I said, my partner does trust litigation. And then on my side, we have about 8 attorneys. 2 of them are transaction attorneys. And so pretty much anything that happens at a mobile home park or RV park, because we represent RV parks as well, we can handle. Buy, sell, reinvest, and do any kinds of easements or documents that you need for your park.
Okay. Well, good stuff. Well, when I hear California, the thing that always comes up for me is the rent control out there. It's something that we don't deal with very much in the Midwest. So, I mean, how big of an animal is that? And is it as bad as they say, or is there actually a good public policy initiative where it's done well? Maybe give me your thoughts on how you navigate that for your clients.
Well, it's a big issue here in California, and as you and I were talking offline, the state is trying to get into statewide rent control, such that would cover any city or county which didn't already have rent control or didn't already have more restrictive rent control. I think it's within approximately over 100 now jurisdictions, mostly around the Southern California area and then in the Bay Area. And some of them are very draconian. In Santa Ana, where my firm is located, Santa Ana, California, the rent control is for annual rent increases is 70% of CPI, not to exceed 3%. So that's
Wow.
pretty tough.
So inflation goes up 8%, you get 3.
That's
Inflation goes up 1, you don't even get 1. That's bad.
Right. You just you really get cut off at the knees. Then they also have vacancy control, which means that you can't increase the rents when you sell. When the mobile home is sold to another homeowner within the park, that's terrible as well, because then you can't even recoup and start it at a fair market rent. Some rent control are more along the lines of rent review boards, where you send out your rent to increase, and then the tenants, if there's like 51%, they can complain, and then you have to go before an arbitrator, and he or she will determine whether or not that amount of rent increase is reasonable, whether it provides you with a fair rate of return. And it, as they say, many cities have it, many counties, and then the state's trying to get into it as well. The state has one rent control for parks that are in two jurisdictions, two incorporated jurisdictions, and that is CPI plus 3%, not to exceed 5%. So I'm not looking forward to any kind of new law on that, but they always try to bring it back for sure. So
I mean, that's interesting because it's so prevalent in almost in all these cities and out the state level. So if I'm looking to buy a property in California, like what's my motivation? Then are people, and I know those properties sell for high dollar. Is the plan just, is it like a covered land play where I'm like, well, I'll buy the mobile home park and manufactured housing community for now until it becomes a redevelopment to skyrise apartments? Or is the business model more like, no, it's just super sticky tenant base, super stable because it's, because you got the ocean nearby and the warm weather that, everybody wants to live there and it's like a sure thing, high collections. What is or do people just accept a lower rate of return because that's just the way it works in that part of the country?
well, I think a lot of those are all good points and all good questions that people coming to California who want to invest in mobile home parks should ask and should consider. A lot of the big companies look at it on the long term, and they look to appreciation in the ground. And so the property does appreciate. The getting out of mobile home parks is somewhat difficult because they take into consideration tenant surveys and whether or not the tenants want to have a conversion of the mobile home park maybe into resident owned, or perhaps closing it down. Closing it down again becomes problematic because a lot of the cities and counties have used mobile home parks as a basis or as one of their affordable housing elements. And so they believe that they can hold those mobile home parks in check for infinitum because that they meet the mandate or try to meet the mandates for affordable housing that the state puts on them a lot of times. That's why there's been litigation between like Huntington Beach, California, and the state with regard to affordable housing because they try to control all the land area there, which would include the mobile home parks.
So if I owned, to make sure I'm following that, so if I owned a mobile home park in one of those cities and I decided that I wanted to, tell everybody to leave, finish their lease and give them notice and I want to leave and I want to put in a Home Depot or skyrise apartments, either the government or the tenant base could say, no, we want you to keep running it like a mobile home park.
Right. The
Wow.
city of Hayward has gone through, they have a ordinance which basically says that you can't change a mobile home park, which has been enforced. And there's a government code that you have to follow, and it has to be approved by the local jurisdiction, be that the county or be that the city, as to whether or not they're going to allow it. And then the tenants come in and say their arguments as opposed to, as far as opposing the conversion. I think the last one, which had a lot of press, was Palo Alto, and that finally ended up, there's 4 acres of property up in Palo Alto, on which is a mobile home park, and they tried to convert that to development, and the city said no, and the city ended up purchasing it because many of the tenants said, well, we've got grandkids that we want to go to the schools because we really want them to go to these schools here in Palo Alto, and we don't want to change over. So it's very, very difficult, and you need to have obviously a whole team to assist if you're going to try to change or convert your mobile home park either into resident owned or to just bare land and then build whatever you want to there. It takes advanced planning. You have to get in with the city or the county, see what they're wanting, see if they're going to be on your side or not. Some cities are very pro, they want to get the mobile home parks out of their city. Some are, no, we want to keep it. Like, as I said, Palo Alto, City of Hayward.
That's definitely, if I was considering investing in California, but you've talked me out of it. But, and from a zoning perspective, when we do this all the time in our firm, all over the country on, trying to maintain the legal non-conforming rights or the grandfathered rights to allow the park to continue. And I've never had a city try to make us remain a mobile home park. Sometimes they'll be okay and they're like, yeah, we're fine with it, no big deal. But normally the approach is like, hey, how about you guys get rid of that and build some new apartments? Or how about you guys get rid of that and just, make it a city park or something? But it just seems unbelievable to me that the city is not going to let you convert it to, it's your property rights. They're going to make you, you'd think you'd have the right to make it to the highest and best use. The arguments I often have to make is the mobile home park is the highest and best use for this location. And we're not going to be able to put, high-rise apartments in because it's, next to the railroad tracks in the floodplain, 3 miles outside of town. Like nobody's going to live in a high-rise apartment there. But you got the opposite approach there where some of the cities are like, nope, we want this. And sounds like it's basically the city saying there's a public policy initiative to, have affordable housing and have it at this location. And it's your obligation to, meet that public policy initiative. And we're not going to let you get wealthy on it because we're going to limit your cost increases. That's just
right. We have a law, the Costa-Hawkins Act, which allows businesses the right to go out of business. Now it's been curtailed and restricted in some ways vis-a-vis like the government code as to what steps you have to go through to close a park. But it still says, yes, you have the ability to go out of business, but they're trying to do away with that as well. So they're very much pro-tenant and not pro-landlord in California, and it's very, very, very difficult. But again, if you have some cities that say, yeah, we'd like to have a high rise, we'd like to have different uses there, then that's why I said your advanced guard needs to go in and see the lay of the land. So you need your to see what the cities or the counties are wanting, so you can please them on that. We had one closed in the city of Carson, and the relocation benefits that they paid out are just unbelievable. They were requiring that you pay the tenants what they paid for their homes originally, even though they may be 40 years old. If they got $150,000, if they paid $150,000 for them back 40 years ago, then you were going to have to pay them $140,000 now. So it's
even if it's worth 20,000 now,
even if it's worth 20, even
does
if
it go the other direction? Like, what if I bought it 50 years ago for like $1,000? Is that all I have to pay it? It's $1,000, or is it going to be the
no? There's the
value?
other part of that, Ferd, that they say, or whatever the fair market value is. So they get them going and coming.
Oh, yeah. I figured that's how it was
We're
going.
going for $200,000, or more. And it's unbelievable. Then they had to pay relocation benefits to pack up their home and to move all their belongings to another place. But they were building high density, affordable housing there. So they did a good job, but it was very, very costly. We ended up having to evict a handful of people, probably 30 people, 30 spaces, because they didn't want to leave. And I mean, notwithstanding all the benefits, notwithstanding, they would give them pre-escrow payouts and everything, that they said, no, we're staying here. And so we had to basically kick out about 30 people. But out of a 330 space park, so that wasn't too bad.
Yeah,
but Yeah, so you really got to know the park. You got to know, what the rent control is, if there is rent control, so that you know what your business model is going to have to be in order to keep the park going. Because here in California, we have failure to maintain lawsuits,
Right.
and such that if you don't maintain it well, then you could get hit with a failure to maintain lawsuit. So you wouldn't want that. But I think if you go in with your eyes wide open and you create a business plan, and they can be profitable because they can also increase in value. And even though you're increasing in rents, you can also take loans out on them to invest in other parks. So that's
So they're going up in value, and the general rule of going up in value is, your NOI goes up. Obviously, there's some macro forces like cap rate compression, things like that, but generally NOI goes up. Is that what you're talking about for value? Just NOI growth? Because it's going to be pretty minimal, I would think, if there's rent control, or is it
it's just
more land
the property.
speculation?
The property value
So
goes up.
just the underlying location that I'm gonna
Right.
almost like in downtown Kansas City, there was a guy that bought a bunch of parking lots, and he was just leasing the space for parking spaces for the sporting events and concerts and stuff. And he wasn't making that much money, but he accumulated 30 parking lots. And then all of a sudden they put in a new arena, new convention hotel. And then all of a sudden we needed more land for other hotels and restaurants and shopping districts. And he's sitting on 30 parking lots. Well, then he was able to sell them for, 100x of what he paid for them, and they would be the next skyrise. So it was really a speculation play, like covered land play, like minimal cash flow in the meantime. But then when the path to progress came in, is it kind of like that where they're speculating?
I think for the REITs and the like, they're looking long term. They're looking 20, 30, 50 years down the way, that they can make their nut. They can, the land's going to appreciate. Value of homes in the median value of homes, I think in LA is close to $1 million.
Wow.
And in San Francisco, it's probably more. And so it just depends on where the park is. If you're out in Lancaster, which is out in the desert, you would go under a different analysis than you would if you're buying, property along the coast, or inland. So it just depends. But I know a lot of the older investors, they would buy a mobile home park. It would increase in value. They refinance it, and then they buy another mobile home park, and they're able to do that in daisy chains so that they cover their bets all various properties.
Yeah.
And then they have more mobile home parks that they can then increase. They just need to again you really need to do your due diligence when you're coming into a mobile home park. How are the infrastructure? How's the water, the gas, the electricity, drainage, sewer, all those. Sometimes we had one failure to maintain up in LA where the company bought the mobile home park in an auction, sight unseen.
Wow.
It had terrible infrastructure. And so they put a lot of money into it, but they still got sued for failure to maintain. And those failure to maintains are in the millions of dollars. I think what they're expect to pay out for each space these days is around $200,000 per space per failure to maintain, plus attorney's fees. So that's bad.
Wow.
So, and then watch where you buy a park. There's parks in Long Beach, California, where they're on old garbage dumps, and the roads go cattywampus and stuff, and they're get failure to maintains very often on those.
Wow, that's interesting animal there. Let me ask you this, John. You got a lot of experience. If I'm a newbie coming in, what are 3 or 4 things that I really got to do? I'm hearing you say infrastructure, understand the zoning and the rent control. Any other high level tip? Don't do this or do this to make sure that you're mitigating your risk.
Well, I would come in with a a Title 25, that covers our mobile home parks in California, Title 25 expert to come in and make sure that all your infrastructure is in good shape, make sure that all the permits in place. We have one client was going to buy an RV park in near the Sierra foothills east of Fresno, and 70 of the spaces were not permitted. I mean, he'd been operating, but he put in 70 spaces without permits. And so that becomes a problem child with you. So you need to make sure the zoning's okay, make sure, a lot of the sellers, you ask them for their conditional use permit. Are they complying with it? They can't even find it. And finding documents when you're purchasing a mobile home park is very, very important. Do you have the plans? Do you have the conditional use permit? Do you have the leases? Sometimes you buy parks where they don't have the leases and they don't give you any. They basically the seller throws them in the dump, because they don't want to have any tiebacks to them, I guess. I don't know, but your due diligence relative to the park, its construction, any complaints, check see if it's been the victim or of a failure to maintain, and have those things been fixed. What's the topography? We have one failure to maintain that just got settled where there was a slope issue, and so you really have to worry about the slopes. Is there pipes under there, and the slopes are going to move, and could be possible for a failure to maintain. Make sure it's an insurable, because that's a new thing here in California. Insurance companies are leaving the state, and so if you can't insure your property, then that is really bad news.
Yeah, that's right. That's a good list of stuff. I was thinking about that when you were talking about the failure to maintain, because we don't have those laws right here around here. I mean, obviously, if you do a bad job as a landlord, you could be sued for any one of a number of items, but it's not like a known category of failure to maintain. So I wondered if you get sued and you're talking 200,000 a space. I mean, is that an insured risk? I mean, can you get insurance on that, or is that deemed like some form of, malfeasance or, intentional act that is an exception under a standard insurance policy?
Most of the failure to maintain lawsuit actions are now being written out so that they can't be insured. And the only way they're getting them in is through negligence. And most of the attorneys here in California will add a negligence cause of action. So that's the trigger of the insurance. They have long reservation of rights letters. You won't be, you can't do anything with regard to punitive damages or any intentional acts, or they won't fix the problem for you, obviously. I mean, it's like being sued as a municipality here in California for not fixing, your streets, your drainage, your sewage, your electricity, and everything. So if your park has those kind of problems that you're looking at, you should avoid it. Another thing to avoid is parks with septic and with well water, because those are high probability of being sued for failure to maintain as well, because they're very difficult. Septic systems fail a large amount of time, and well water can have contaminants in it like magnesium and other elements, which they just love to sue on.
Yeah, I bet. I mean, yeah, we've got a couple parks with a well or septic or lagoon that we own, and we have to test the stuff all the time. And it's like just recently we had a bad test, and like this park's not in the well, it's city water, but we still have to test it because we're billing it back, and comes out of the faucet. We didn't create the water, but we test it and then send it in, and apparently it had some chemical in it. But it sounds like they get a fair number of false positives, so we had to retest it for a couple weeks in a row. It wasn't like emergency level. It was just like retest it for a couple weeks in a row, and then if it comes back clean, then we're off the hook. But it's like if it doesn't come back clean, I didn't create the water. It's coming from the city a mile
Right.
away. but they're like, well, you're
Right.
billing for it, so now it's your problem. So that can be a bad situation. Yeah. So I wouldn't even, I
Be
would
a very
definitely,
bad situation. And, handing out bottled water, making people, getting people into motels where they can take showers, or bringing in portable showers and the like, can get really expensive.
oh
Bad
yeah.
electrical systems, you have to bring in generators, and that can get very, very expensive. And so it's really, transformers, are they in good condition, bad condition? So I mean, a lot of investors will come in and look at the upside. How can we increase the rents? But I think you need to really look underneath the hood and make sure that everything's good there, because ultimately, that could really come back to haunt you and cause you great financial harm. So it's
Yeah.
those
No,
and some of the
absolutely.
tips.
Yeah, infrastructure, sometimes it's hard to really get a good handle on it, but you really got to get your handle on it best you can. I had a client that it was city sewer, but they said, oh, it's city sewer. Well, then like the railroad came in adjacent to the property and moved some sort of bridge. It was a state bridge, but it was for the railroad that was forcing them to move it. Well, when they put in the new bridge, they drilled down and they hit a city sewer line down the road. Well, then they repiped the sewer line, and then it created, a different flow for the mobile home park. Had a lift station, and the mobile home park couldn't handle the capacity anymore. So the lift station just became like overflowing full of sewage. And it was obviously an immediate emergency, nasty situation. So they called out the guy with the truck that's going to come suck it up. Well, it was
Right.
coming so fast because 100 residents there that the guy was having to fill the truck up like 3 times a day because it's coming from both directions, because coming from the city's line, from other people's property, and from the park. So they were spending something like $4,500 a day pumping out the sewage, and there was no end in sight until the on the in the railroad right away until the line was fixed. It was like, good luck getting the railroad to respond to you, and good luck getting
Oh
this.
yeah.
So even the city's like, well, the state's involved. The state's like, well, we're doing it for the railroad. Well, so it was a big deal. So this went on for like 45 days, and they're like, we're pumping thousands and thousands of dollars every day, and we thought it was gonna go on in perpetuity. So then you're really upside down. So eventually, the government did the right thing. I mean, we kind of had to get a little nasty, but they eventually were like, yeah, I guess it was a result of our project. So because we were not allowed to go on the railroad property and replumb this. We would have. We'll fix it ourselves. It's cheaper than pumping all the sewage, but ultimately the city got the state to get involved, and the state was the one that was doing the construction work because it was a bridge, and the state had apparently, because the bridge had permission to be on the railroad right away, and the state fixed it. But they didn't give my client any of the money back. There's
They didn't reimburse your client for
no,
any
they
of the
didn't
money,
reimburse them.
right?
They didn't reimburse. They had their reasons why. Um, and it's like you fight the city on who was going to pay. Was the city going to pay? Was the state? Was the railroad? So my client ultimately was like, look, as long as it's now fixed, we'll just write that off as, it's probably I don't know, $7 or $8 million property. Like, well, if we had a one-time pain of 150 grand, that's probably better than, having the city hate you forever. And they decided not to pursue it. I was kind of surprised. I kind of thought they'd want us to pursue the lawsuit. And they're like, no, 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 we don't want that. We just want them to fix the sewer line. Like, okay, your property, your money. Um, but yeah, I mean, just a nightmare scenario dealing with the government on some of those issues.
Yeah. Another thing that's gone on in California is back in when the mobile home residency law was being, in its infancy. Back in the 1990s, they passed a law which said, okay, you'll enter into, if you build a mobile home park, then, and it was after January 1st of 1990, then you're not going to, or 86 or something along those lines. I forget what date it is specifically, but if you build it, then you won't be subject to rent control, for as long as the park goes on. And they changed that this couple of years ago. And so now the new construction starts as of January 1st, 2023. So Can you imagine you built a mobile home park after 1990 and spent millions of dollars into it, and then made all that investment on the basis that you weren't going to be subject to rent control, and now you're subject to rent control.
So they did not grandfather in. So if I built one in 1999, I didn't get grandfathered. I thought you were going to say that starting in 2023, but how can they do that? It seems like that's something that I would sign up for the lawsuit on. Like,
yeah, nobody wanted to file a lawsuit on it.
that's
And the
surprising.
state has basically said that, what we can give you, we can take away. Another example of that is they had exemptions for long-term leases. So again, you enter into a long-term lease, which could be 30 years, 40 years, and they said, well, that's going to be exempt from rent control. Well, they took that away in 2020 under the Tenant Protection Act here in California, and said, no, we're doing away with that. Everybody's going to be subject to rent control after it just occurred in January 1st of 2025. So you can still have a long-term lease, but in rent control jurisdictions, there's no incentive to have a long-term lease.
Right.
Only in the non-rent control jurisdictions. That's
So I mean, I'm thinking, let's look back at the, recent national election where, Trump picked up ground and, almost the whole country. Obviously, he didn't win California. That was never in the cards. But I mean, are people in California, I mean, leaving the state because of some of these crazy policies? I mean, you still got, an ocean and mountains and sunshine, but I mean, are people leaving in a significant numbers to go to Nevada and Texas and places, or is it just like, well, this is just part of it? Because to me, all this stuff just feels crazy. I'd be like, why would I want to invest there? Maybe I'll visit for like a week, but I'm not going to ever think about buying it. Maybe I'll buy a candy bar if I can afford it, but there's no way I'm going to buy real estate in the market like that. But I mean, obviously,
well,
the guys
again,
smarter
I
than me
think
are doing it.
it's that they're still doing it, and I forget what the cap rate is. Current cap rate is now. I think it is in the high fours or low fives. It used to be down to in the low threes, but they can still they're still selling it. A lot of the sales are actually offline, but they're still hot commodities to book a lot of money into, and so that's why they just need to go into them with their eyes wide open, because then they come to me and they say, oh, we want to raise the rent. And I said, well, okay, well, you're in the rent control jurisdiction, you can only raise it 2%. And they're saying, wait a second, that's not right. We've got all these improvements that we need to do. And I say, that's true, you need to do those improvements.
Wow.
You might be able to get them under a capital, CapEx improvement provision. Some cities under the rent control or counties will say, okay, well, you can include 50% of that as a rent increase over the next 15, 20 years. And then once that's done, then that rent increase goes away for that. It's amortized over 15, 20 years. So it just depends of what city jurisdiction or county jurisdiction you're under.
Can you get the residents, if they chose to kind of waive some of their rights to that rent control? For example, like, hey guys, we have no pool, we have no dog park, but if you guys agree to 10% increases for the next 20 years, I'll invest $500,000 in amenities. And can you do that, or is that essentially like them signing away their constitutional rights and it's not enforceable?
That would be non-enforceable. That's against public policy. And some jurisdictions will allow you to enter into agreements with your tenants to do certain things. But for example, down in San Diego, in the city of Santee, to do any capital improvements that you want to pass through, you have to, and you can only pass through 50% of it. You have to get 51% of the tenants to approve it. Now, I've gone to tenant meetings, and the tenants say, wait a second, why am I going to agree to that? That's your job. That's what we pay you rent for. They were going for gates and video cameras for security reasons, and nobody wanted to agree to that they would it was going to be an increase to them of like $12 a month, but they were going to have these nice super gates and video cameras and the like, and they didn't want to go for it. So, you know, you put the tenants are really in control, it seems like, in a lot of the cities. And like in Santa Ana, I was saying that the 70% of CPI, well, they passed rent control as an initiative. And that means if the only way you can get it taken out, repealed, is through another initiative. Whereas in other jurisdictions, the city council can, or the county supervisors can just do away with it. But here in Santa Ana,
well, is there any good public policy that or any other tips related to that California is doing, or other places you work, that you think we should, like, I'm not hearing you say, hey, you should take our code book and put it in Missouri. Are there any pros out of that, or is it just, I mean, it's good for your law firm that you get a lot of work because there's a lot of city issues, but
one of a full employment plan, yeah. No, I can't. Unfortunately, there's been studies that shown that rent control is very bad for any property owner. But I think it's still the lure of California. It's still the lure of the appreciation of property, and that we can get by with these lower increases because we're on a long-term view on it, or we're looking at the appreciation of the property down the way. If they're lucky to be in a jurisdiction that wants to get rid of mobile home parks, and they might be able to convert it to another use. But that's why I say you really need to check into it. It's not just what is the possible upside. You have to really, roll your sleeves up and find out what the problems are, the potential problems are.
Yeah. Wow. Fascinating.
I know Colorado has been flirting with rent control, and they struck it down 3 times.
Well, they've got a right of first refusal, where the tenants have a right of first refusal to buy the property.
Yeah, we don't have that statewide. We do it and there's case law on it that says that the cities can't do it, but some of the cities still do it. Say, okay, sue us, because we still believe that the tenants have the right to buy the park, and so that's some in San Diego County that do that. So it's if statewide rent control comes around, it's going to it's going to be the 3%, not to exceed 5%, or it's going to be like they have for apartments. They have statewide rent control for apartments, CPI plus 5%, not to exceed 10%. And you could live with that, I think.
Yeah.
But the CPI plus 3%, not to exceed 5%, is getting on, it makes it difficult. And then in the cities where they have 0.75% or 70% of CPI not to exceed 3%, it makes you really cringe. So it's just, I mean, they can't do anything with it. A lot of, either people are going to stick with it, or they're going to maybe sell it to a REIT, some company that can take the hit and put it in their portfolio and wait for it to appreciate down the way.
Wow. So, I mean, what are the smallest parks that can survive on these sort of with this sort of control? I mean, are there 15 site parks? Or are they all, 50, 100, 200?
Well, most of the mobile home, the rent control will apply to pretty much any park that has 2 or more. Mobile home park in California is defined as having 2 or more spaces for rent for mobile homes. Some jurisdictions, like El Monte, California, say that if you have less than 10 spaces, you're not subject to the rent control ordinance. So some of them have looked at that and determined that a certain number would be exempt from rent control. But most of the times they're just subject to any of the rent control, any of the park models. Any of the parks that are within their jurisdiction. Yeah.
That's interesting stuff. John, this is fascinating. You clearly know your stuff, and you're the go-to guy there in California. Before we break here, any other tips or tricks or lessons you want to share with our audience?
Let's see. I think it's in California, we really need to get a good attorney and somebody who's familiar with it, so that you can go in with your due diligence. Again, as I say, I just had somebody come in that said, well, we're going to close on Friday and we need you to look at this, this, and this. You've already got a purchase sale agreement. You're already locked in. So you really need to do it.
I get those clients sometimes. Hey, can you do this? Can you do this today? We're supposed to close tomorrow.
Right. It's like, are you crazy?
My hourly rate just doubled if I'm doing this today.
Yeah, I know.
That's what my old boss used to say. He said, good, fast, or cheap, pick two.
Yeah. And then California is, you need to hire good people. I think good people. California has instituted a manager education requirement that's going into place this year. The regulations are going into this year. They have to be compliant as of May 1st of 2026. So, you're going to need to always have good people in your management team, because, rent increases, resident interface is very, very important, especially for the, failure to maintains and the like. Make sure that you're complying with the laws and, such that you're not trying to say, well, I'm going to do this, maybe somebody will catch me on it. Under the mobile home residency law, you can get up to $2,000 sanctions for intentionally and violating the mobile home residency law. So that's not good. Also your residency documents. A lot of parks are using residency documents that they had drafted back in the 90s. They're very, very antiquated, and you really need to have good in place residency documents, rules and regulations, guidelines for your applications, and architectural standards. Very, very important. Otherwise, we have a couple of I have a client that has a couple of parks that they've ground let, and they were asleep at the wheel, and they allowed the tenant the ground lessee was basically running the parks into the ground and collecting the rents. And so now they're possibly going to be, holding the bags of 2 mobile home parks that could be subject to failure to maintain. And so you always have to be cognizant of what your duties are, because under the mobile home residency law, the people who own the property and the people who manage the property and own the mobile home parks are all subject to the failure to maintain lawsuits and responsibilities.
Interesting stuff.
That's why you need attorneys.
Yeah, that's right. All right, John. Well, great chatting with you. Thanks for sharing your insights and wisdom. And until next time, have a good rest of the day.
Hey, Ferd, thanks a lot. I really appreciate it. And you take care, and we'll talk to you later.
All right. Sounds good.
You've been listening to the Mobile Home Park Lawyer Podcast with Ferd Neiman. Ready to learn more? Go to www.themobilehomelawyer.com for free resources and materials to help you succeed. If you love the podcast, go to Apple Podcasts, give us your review, and subscribe today. Thank you for listening. Neither the Supreme Court of Missouri nor the Missouri Bar reviews nor approves certifying organizations or specialist designations. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely upon advertisements.